Good evening and welcome to this presentation by the Multiple Sclerosis Foundation, MS Focus. We are rounding out November, which is Caregiver Month, with a panel of individuals living with MS who are also caregivers for family members. In a moment, I'll introduce them, but I would like to thank Novartis for sponsoring this particular panel discussion this evening. We're very blessed to have businesses like this that do allow us to do more presentations for the MS community. Um, we're joined tonight by five individuals who are living with MS and are caregivers for family members. So let me introduce myself first. I'm Cherie, the patient healthcare liaison for the Multiple Sclerosis Foundation. I'm also living with MS and have been in and out of the caregiver role for many years, partly because I'm an RN. I'm an MS certified nurse. Um, and I'd like to start the introductions by giving each of our panelists a couple of minutes to sort of introduce themselves in their caregiver role. So we'll start with Gretchen.
Hi, everyone. Um, I was diagnosed about 25 years ago, and I also was a nurse, so the caregiving piece kind of comes along with it. Um, Earlier this year, at the beginning of the year, was when I learned that my MS had progressed to secondary progressive, and I had to rely on my husband for a little more help than I normally would. Shortly after we learned that, he was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. So we did a little bit of a role reversal, and we are having to work as a team now because there are some things I can't do, some things he can't do, and some things it takes both of us to get accomplished.
Thank you. Julie?
Hi, I'm Julie Stam, and I was diagnosed with MS in 2007. So it'll be 18 years coming up in January. In 2020, my mom retired from her job where she worked for the police department, and was diagnosed with FTD, frontal temporal dementia. So she was having paranoia and a lot of issues, so she needed support, and that support is just getting more and more required. And now she lives with us here in Colorado. We moved her from New York. We were all in New York. We all moved from New York to Colorado. She lives 2 doors down, and her primary caregiver.
Thanks. Dan?
Hi, I'm Dan Digman, and I was diagnosed with MS on Valentine's Day of 2000. And so I have relapsing remitting MS. And in December 28th, 2002, I met Jennifer, who I fell in love with. We met at an MS event. And in 2005, we were married. Jennifer has secondary progressive MS. And so then, since we've been married in September of 2005, I've been her primary caregiver, and so we share a lot in the caregiving. But because Jennifer can't stand on her own and has to use a wheelchair, we do a lot of the work, and I do a lot of the heavy lifting. But she's still my primary caregiver as well.
For those of you who get the MS Focus magazine, Dan is one of our regular contributors to the MS Focus magazine. Christina?
Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Christina Nelson. I was diagnosed in 2001, and I met my husband, Eric Nelson, in 2018. We got married in 2020, and he also has been diagnosed with MS as well. And so I am his primary caregiver I still move around, still mobile. I still work a full-time job from home. Thank God. I use a rollator, and my husband has been bedridden. He can use a wheelchair and all that good stuff, but I have been his primary caregiver.
Thank you. Dania?
Hello, my name is Dania. I was diagnosed with MS in 2006. I probably should have been diagnosed 2004, but it turned into 2006. And I am a caregiver for my father, who was diagnosed with primary progressive MS. It was a gradual thing that happened for me caring with my dad. But the fun part of being my dad's caregiver is that my dad lives in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I live in Compton, California. So everything I do is virtual. And like today was a great example of time difference because my phone probably rang at 4:30 this morning and I had doctor's appointments. So I get fun things like that. But yeah, that is my story. And I'm grateful for my diagnosis so I can help my dad who's bedridden because of MS.
Thank you. Let me just tell the persons who are joining us online, either in Facebook Live or on Zoom, how to ask your questions. We really want to keep the chat empty so that our behind the scenes staff can pop any questions from our live stream feed into the chat. But if you have a question, please tick it into the question and answer box at the bottom of your screen if you're on Zoom. If the question is for a specific panelist, don't hesitate to target that person also for your question. I'd like to just sort of ask you, I know at times when I have been caring for family members in the past, my MS has actually gotten worse because of the added strain of either the mileage. There was one point in time where for 3 years, every single month, I was driving a 900-mile round trip to take my dad to his oncologist and get back to work. So I was working 30 hours a week in a 4-day work week and doing a 3-day weekend to do the driving for that trip. And my MS just kind of spiraled. So in hindsight, I can see that there were things that I could have done to probably minimize some of that spiral, and managing stress was definitely one that I wasn't managing well. But I wonder if anybody can share with me what you do to take care of you when the stresses of caring for another get to be forefront. And I'll just throw that out to anybody who wants to comment on that.
Well, I
You-
completely agree with you, Cherie. I think the stress of it definitely exacerbates everything in the world of MS. And I also have progressive, but I hadn't had as much progression in years until I started taking this role on. And I think it is an incredible burden, one that I don't wish on anyone. I think that it takes a lot, and I think managing your expectations. I think when I first started on the role, I was micromanaging everything, and cameras are in the house, watching, making sure she's eating, and even though I dropped the food, and I think setting realistic plans is the best thing that I could have done, and that's only as of recent. So I would say it was 4 years of micromanagement and taking on way too much, and then it took me having to realize, like, I'm not gonna be able to give my son the life he deserves because it's ruining my health, that I took a step back and had to reprioritize.
I can I agree with the like take a step back because I was very hands-on, just going, and I'm so grateful for my aunt where she's like, hold on, like relax. But I I have to what was a big wake-up call for me is I was in physical therapy one day. And it was right before she took my blood pressure. And right before she took it, I got some news regarding my dad. And like there was a mishap with his transportation. And so she takes my blood pressure. And my blood pressure was always like 120s, over whatever. And when she took it, it was like 140, 150 something. I was like, oh, that's what happened, when I got upset. And I was like, okay, so we're going to not do that anymore. But for me, my relationship with God is what keeps me going, what keeps me calm. Listening to music it helps me, and I have like an amazing support system of friends that it's like I can just send a text message like, y'all please pray for me because of this, or I'm feeling like this. And I just took, which first time, and I see why it's necessary, is I just took my first trip, because I had never, anything I did, it was I was going to Pittsburgh to go, see my dad, or had to go back to Atlanta for something. So to do self-care of actually taking a vacation and not, just stressing out about everything, it helps. So don't stress, breathe, spend time with God, and music is like my go-to. So yeah, it helps me.
I actually can concur, Donia, with spending time with God and praying, and worship music is in particular is my go-to. With me, and this is funny because I just did this recently. Taking a long shower. My husband is always like, "You can stay in the shower forever." And I was like, "I can," because that is where I get this alone time, and it's just me. And I put on my music or a podcast, and that's what I do. I sit in there, and sometimes I'm singing, sometimes I'm just, worshiping. I'm praying. I'm talking to God. I'm like, what's next? What are we doing here? My husband and I do have a ministry for people, especially diagnosed with MS or incurable diseases, as they say MS is. It is called Restoring Health Ministries. We're both pastors, and so that could be a lot too, So it's a lot of things, and sometimes you just need to get away on your own. And if getting in the shower and staying there for as long as I can, and playing some music and just getting away for that moment, if that's what I need to do, then that's the go-to right there. That's the go-to. And my husband, he plays a part in it too, because sometimes he can see when things have gotten a little bit overwhelming, and he'll say, "What do you want to eat tonight? Let's order something out," versus me going into the kitchen and trying to make something to eat or cook for both of us or something. Or, we can have leftovers, bless his heart. I know a lot of people don't like leftovers, but he's okay with that. So he does his part to try to alleviate some stress. And then I do what I just mentioned to do the same thing to alleviate the stress.
Thanks.
I think for me, a lot with what we do, like with Jennifer, it's a lot of it's just prioritizing and what's important, what absolutely has to be done today. And again, it's like the age old cliche, don't sweat the small stuff. And what do I have to do to get forward with today? And I think that's where it's great with Jennifer, that it's so much as she's very understanding, and she's the one who pushes the self-care more than I do, because she's always like, she's the one who's like, when's the last time you went and got a massage? Just as far as that, just getting away, separating and stuff. And the music, I mean, absolutely, because that's like the immediate tension release of everything. Just, loud music to just drain the emotions and center you back up, with prayer, obviously, too. So it is, but I think it's just the prioritizing to make sure you stay focused on what needs to get done.
One of the things that I did when I could see what was probably coming down the pike with my husband, um, I I scheduled an appointment with my neurologist. I scheduled an appointment with my primary care, and my primary care is really, really great. And she says, "Okay, I'm going to see you once a month, just to ride herd, just to make sure that you are doing what you need to do." The neurologist suggested, before we got in the thick of things, that I go back for some extra physical therapy to help build my endurance and kind of
Right.
get in shape for this. And that worked well. My husband is a veteran, and we do utilize the VA medical centers, and his health care comes from VA. So the social worker at VA enrolled me in their caregiver support program, which has been a godsend. Um, they have multiple groups, they have multiple resources. So that's been really, really helpful. And I go to the library when he's, down for the afternoon, taking a nap, or his buddy is here to visit. I go to the library and I get a new stack of books, and I'm learning to do more in the self-care realm.
Thanks. When I heard you say, Gretchen, that your primary care was going to see you once a month, I went, one more thing to do every month when everything else is also busy. Are you finding that any of these visits can be like telehealth visits or virtual visits?
Actually, my primary care physician and I are friends outside the practice, and she lets me come in at 7:30 in the morning and just, or she will call, if I call and say I can't make this appointment, it's just too nuts. I'll check, and then she'll say I'll check on you this weekend. I just want to keep you on track. I don't want you getting too worn down. Don't want things going awry on your end. So she's pretty
Perfect.
flexible with stuff, and she's a mile from the house.
Yeah.
So everything else is a horrendous drive, but that's what happens when you live in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, I found that it seemed like as the weight of my caregiving at times got heavier, my own personal appointments got to be more and more and more. And it felt like um, nothing much more could fit on the plate. So, the extra visits for physical therapy make total sense. And the extra touch base with your primary care is phenomenal. But I think one of the things that I would kind of caution is that you probably need to minimize the time that you're there. Physical therapy, I find that sometimes if they want to take that whole 45 minutes or an hour that I'm with them doing exercise, that wipes me out too much. I have to do a return demonstration. Basically, what do you want me to do? Show me what you want me to do. I'll show you that I can do it. And then I can't waste energy here doing it. I've got to do it outside. So those are just a couple of tips that I've found with the caregiving.
I don't think right now I could fit physical therapy into the schedule.
Oh,
Um,
good.
we were still in a lot of the figuring out process when I did what we were going to do treatment wise, what it was going to entail. And I could do it a little better then. Right now, I think it would just be a little too much because it did wipe me out. The, I was doing PT and OT back to back at the same time because I had to drive. And yeah, I don't think I could do that right now. That was before things started progressing here. But I felt like I did kind of build my endurance because I knew what was coming, having been done the same kind of care for my sister and my mom.
Um, have any of you been in this caregiving role when you yourself have gotten sick? I remember one time, maybe a year or so ago, Dan, we were talking and you had just gotten a COVID booster and Jen needed to be transferred and you felt like crap. Um, uh,
I mean, and interesting you bring it up because yeah, just this morning, then after coughing uncontrollably for the last 2 days of the weekend, go in and find out I have viral bronchitis, and so but fortunately, I wasn't running a fever, and it is when I'm running a fever, it totally wipes me out, and I can't transfer Jennifer, and that's where you thank God for her patience. And then thank God that you have a Hoyer lift in your house to be able to do those kinds of transfers. But those are things that we really have to make sure you have a backup plan when you're doing those kinds of caregiving and who can help in those situations. And that's where, fortunately for Jennifer, through the Medicaid waiver program here in Michigan, she has a full-time caregiver who's here during the day while I'm working. And Jen, her caregiver, is always a phone call away, and she can come and step in. So I think that's one of the biggest things that, we have to do as people with MS who are caregiving for others, is just make sure we have plan B and plan C in place just in case we're not at our best, or then again, the flexibility and make adjustments on what has to get done today.
Julie, I wonder how you deal with the dementia two doors down at times when you have to be in a place like this. Is there a plan in place to kind of keep your eyes on her? And do you see this being continuing long term, or are you getting to a point where you need to get an alternate plan in place?
I think I'm trying to keep her in the home for as long as possible. So we have cameras in every room that she's aware of, apart from the bathroom. Luckily, she's not a runner, so we don't have to worry about her. She won't leave the house without me, which is very comforting because we know I don't have to worry. I can at least sleep once she's in and she's locked in. She's not going anywhere. The stove is disconnected. She's very well monitored. There's not much that, I could leave my 8-year-old son there. I wouldn't, but I could, it's a very safe space for her. And I think having the cameras, being able to check in to make sure that she's okay. But I do have a plan, as you say, you have to have a plan B, C, D. So I just had a hysterectomy. So my sisters had to step up, and, she had to go out and stay with them for a few weeks while I recover. And I think that would be my advice to caregivers, is set up a time where you get a break, and not just a day break, but like a week or 2 weeks, because it's recharged my energy, my like battery completely. Just even having a surgery and healing myself, it's given me so much more of a recharge, having an actual break from worrying about someone else's breakfast, lunch, dinner, outings, socialization, all of that. A little break. So now we did establish that once a quarter she's going to go to my sister and stay for a week, and just to give me that kind of break. We need it.
Oh, good. Dania, what kind of system do you have in place? You're separated by time zones.
Thousands and thousands.
What's your support system in Pennsylvania?
Yeah, so my dad has 24-hour care. And my aunt lives around the corner. And so, with his care, I communicate with the care companies, the caregivers, and with my aunt. And you mentioned, what do we do when we're not feeling good? I'm able to, like I told y'all, I called my dad before we started this to say, hey, this is what I'm doing. And so with my dad, I can, say, hey, I'm not feeling good, or I'm going to lay down for a little bit. And so if you need something, you can call, which is his older sister. And then I'll let her know too, like if I'm just like wiped out, like this is what I'm gonna do, but I still have the camera, where I can see him. And a good thing is a two-way camera. So it's like you can hear me, I can hear you, type of thing. And most people are okay with it, but there's a few that are paranoid. I'm like, you must be doing something wrong because I'm not watching the cameras at all. And so I have to do that and have peace about, knowing like he's going to be okay. He's a grown man. He's right there. You can see him. And, my aunt and my uncle around the corner, that's helpful. So just over communicating about how I'm feeling. Yeah, that helps.
Well, Gretchen, it sounds like your husband's still pretty functional. Good. So you haven't gotten to the point yet where things have gotten out of control, but it sounds like you're listening to your body and not taking on some of the extra stuff, like the extra appointments right now. Yeah, okay. You're on mute, Gretchen.
Sorry about that. Yeah, he still is able to do his own ADLs. He's pretty much in the chair in the recliner most of the day. He has a lot of fatigue. I have to really work with him to get him to eat. His ability to walk more than 8 or 10 feet unassisted that's about it. So we did just last week. Now he has his own rollator and I have mine back. Mine did not fit him anyway. He's a foot taller than I am. So he has a new rollator and that's helped with things. Um, it's just I don't I don't get much sleep because I have to kind of sleep with one ear open because when he also has a paralyzed vocal cord. So he tends to get choked or to have some care there so he doesn't aspirate. And he has aspirated before. In fact, he's getting over a case of aspiration pneumonia now. So, and I have to keep everything straight and his medicine straight and make sure he takes it. And yeah,
You guys are dealing with some not always easy stuff. It's tough. But I'm hoping that there are people that are tuning into this in similar situations that don't feel quite so alone, don't feel quite so how am I managing this? Other people don't have to deal with this and MS too. And I think it's a lot more common than we realize. Many of us are parts of families that have other health issues that we're trying to help manage. And I don't think that there are very many families out there that aren't dealing with more than one condition. So you're good examples, I think, for people that there are ways to kind of rise above your own discomfort to be victorious and reaching out and helping others. Are there any resources that any of you have found in your communities or online that are helpful when it comes to either providing the care for the person for whom you're caring or having the resources available to help you?
I think utilizing tools and resources in terms of like getting good cognitive care that comes to the house, good physical therapy that comes to the house. So these resources can come to her instead of me having to continually go to appointments. And that takes a huge burden off because cognitive therapy is twice a week, physical therapy is twice a week, physical therapy for me is twice a week, doctor appointments. So it's a lot of like juggling. So the more that I can have at her home so that she's there and getting comfortable with people coming in, because eventually it's going to be more people coming in, is really beneficial, I think. So getting people to help without adding travel, and that just, it wears you down, all of that. And then there's also, depending on the symptoms, but even in terms of the pills, the ones that lock and then it has a timer so you can see if it's actually taken, with an alarm so they can't forget, and then air tagging, things that they might hide if they have paranoia. So there's just like so many resources out there and just finding the ones that help make your job a little bit easier. For me, at least.
Thanks.
For me, UPMC has been very helpful for me with getting resources for my dad. It's a lot of, I looked up, I was like, why does Pittsburgh have all these things? But it's like I think it's number 2 now, like place to live if you have a disability. And it's like he was supposed to have a nurse come today and they just check on his well-being. They've had OT, PT, and I just constantly get calls like, hey, we have this, by the way, and they'll, send something every year. But for my dad, we do a lot of game show network and play games through there for cognitive. And I try to make sure that my dad, has what he needs. But also my dad, I didn't mention this before, my dad was a musician. He played the saxophone and he sings. and all that. And so he had a birthday recently, and so I surprised him with his music. And he was listening like I thought this was gone, but music for him is great. So it's like let's find the, what's the best radio, that you can get, or just with different things. I don't want him to, yes, he's bedridden, but there's still things that he can do. He can get in his chair and, all that. But I want to be sensitive to make sure I'm not forcing him to do things that he doesn't want to do, because I can do that. Like it can do that real good if I wanted to, but I'm like, is it that you don't want to do it or what's going on? But the resources from UPMC and from different doctors and all that has been helpful for me with helping with my
UPMC, University of Pittsburgh Medical
Pittsburgh
Center.
Medical Center. Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's the
Hmm.
medical system that has been amazing for me and my dad.
That's awesome.
One of the things that people are often not aware of is that um, our local funeral parlors can often be great resources for medical equipment that's been donated when people have died. Um, and if you need a hospital bed, or if you need a wheelchair or a transfer chair or anything like that, um, our local funeral home is always seems to have what somebody in the community needs. So I'm just throwing that out there as a potential resource for people. Um, and if they particularly don't have it, they may know of another place that they can get it for you. There are a lot of equipment loan closets all over the place that are not well advertised. So look in your local community for things like that. When it gets to the point where um, maybe you need extra grab bars in the bathroom, or a raised toilet seat, or even a wider door on the bathroom. Um, Habitat for Humanity will often do those repairs or those modifications at no charge, with you providing the materials for them to do it. And if things are so tight that you can't handle the cost of the materials, the Multiple Sclerosis Foundation does have some grant programs where monies might be available to help provide that. So if you go to msfocus.org and grant program, things like assistive technology or home care assistance programs could help with that. We also have a toll-free number that people can call and just talk to somebody about what the needs are. And that is 888-673 6287. And those lines are manned from around 9 o'clock in the morning until about 5 in the afternoon Eastern time, Monday through Friday. So you get to talk to a real person and you're not dealing with a machine. And we really strive to be that person that's there when somebody needs them. Anybody that's listening in the audience have any questions for any of the panelists? Please feel free to tick them into the Q&A or use the raised hand button. Actually, it's in the reactions on the bottom of the page on my Zoom, where it says react with a heart. If you click onto that, it gives you the possibility of raising your hand. I can allow you to unmute and then let you ask your question.
Can I say really quick, the MS Foundation and the National MS Society has been great resources too. So it's like when you're talking, I'm like, duh, those two have been very helpful. So yeah, go ahead, Christine. I think you're going to say something.
I was resources as far as community wise. What I found is, unfortunately, we haven't had many resources unless something happens to him, like if he goes into the hospital and then he comes home and then he can get physical therapy and occupational therapy and those things, right? But for us, it has been a little harder to get community wise or certain things because we're married and they keep saying that we make too much money, especially since I'm still working full time. And so those things we find a little bit more difficult to have to obtain certain things, for him. Now we do have VNA, which is great when like I think Julie was saying, like when somebody has to come to the house, like his doctor or the nurse practitioner comes to the house. His doctor has come to the house too, and or a nurse, a care nurse or whatever has to come to the house. So those were are great resources, because it would be a lot harder for us to have to get out and try to go to a physical doctor. So someone coming to the house is amazing. And so we depend on those that extra help there. And I want to say, we do also have someone to come in twice a week to help us, a nurse's aide who comes in twice a week, which alleviates a lot of you know uh from being overwhelmed and everything. And so those things help a lot, but unfortunately not for everyone gets to have like some community help, because it may be finances, or you make too much money, or something like that. They even suggested to my husband and I that maybe you can consider getting divorced, and then he could then he could get some extra help. And I'm like, no, we're not going to be divorced so he can get
You just got
that extra
married.
help. Yeah, we only been married like going on 5 years now, so we're not going to divorce for that. God will provide. So we're
I know
we're making it.
that have held off getting married for exactly what you're talking about. And it's so sad that that's, how the system is, where it's like, are you kidding me? Like, but yeah, I'm sorry, that's a reality for some people of like, love you, but I can't marry you because I don't want to lose my benefits.
Yeah.
Yeah, what do you do? Yeah.
Should write down my questions that pop up when you're talking, because they just go out of my head sometimes, but it'll come back. It'll come back. Um, at the very beginning of the webinar, Julie said something about micromanaging. Um, that's me in a nutshell. I tend to micromanage, and that can cause for irritability and stress in the relationship. Um, and I want to know if anybody's found ways to step out of that micromanaging role. Is there a trigger? Is there some magic bullet that you can share with people?
I wish I had the answer. I really do. I mean, I think sometimes the things that set me off are, okay, you have to shower today, and then she doesn't want to, and then she gets annoyed, and all of that. Why do I care if she showers that day? Like, I have to let it go. So there's certain things that I have to, because if it went on for longer than 2 or 3 days, then I can understand I have to push for this even further. But if she wants to skip washing her hair for a couple of days, I don't need to make that the biggest stress. It could be like, okay, let's move on. Let's go get breakfast, or, like, let's go for a walk and just let it go. It's hard to not. I do think that the break is essential, because without having this break, I was at breaking point. So I think having a little separation for even like 24 hours where you don't have to think or talk to them is essential.
Yeah, I I think there are times when that micromanaging for me has gotten me almost to the breaking point, dealing with the irritability and not being irritable back. And it's brought me to tears, and that has been a cleansing thing at times, because they realize that I'm dealing with stuff too. And it's like, no, I'm not trying to treat you like a child. I'm just trying to make sure that you have everything that you need, because I love you so much. I don't want you to want for anything. And I think if sometimes it takes maybe actually saying those words, to put it back into a relationship and out of the caregiver, cared for role. And I know a hug goes a long ways. A shoulder rub or a back rub goes a long ways, and things like that, to just reintroduce that tenderness sometimes. Um, but if anybody else has
I was
any other tips.
Yeah, I have, and I'm telling you, I'm so grateful to God for my aunt because she helps me bring things into perspective. And sometimes I have to ask myself, like, is he going to die if that happens? Like, is it really that deep? And it's not, you know. And when I say like you he wanted to, I'm trying to think of something like so random where it's very minor, where it's like, why are you holding on to it? It's not going to kill him. You know, that's what he wants to do. It's like, if you want to sleep with the blanket on your toes only or on your head only, or, you know, whatever, that's fine. It's like, I'm not going to make you put your blanket a different way. It's not what, like, is it worth going crazy, stressing yourself out, you know, micromanaging it? It's like, it's not that deep. So I have to look at it that way. So that helps me out a lot.
Um, do you have, any of you, an individual, a peer that you can talk to when things kind of get, to help you keep things in perspective? I have not been very good about that in my life. I've tended to be a loner most of my life, meeting other people's needs rather than my own. So, um, there are times in my life where I've actually had people that I'm very comfortable doing that with. And I'm just wondering if there's a go-to person that you've got in your relationship that you can reach out to help regain some perspective when it's needed.
This is, I have a niece that she lives about 100 miles from here, but as she says, you know, I can be there in a flash. Um, we we figured out when to talk, you know, we talk on her commute very, very early in the morning. And she's a very positive person. She has been through this same situation herself, um, and ended up being a young widow with two teenage boys. So she did all the caregiving primarily on her own and with some help from the boys. And you know, I can call her when things are good. I can call her when things are bad. And she is also very quick to remind me that, you know, you got to take care of yourself. You got to do this. It's not the end of the world. Take a deep breath. Um, so I rely on her heavily. And the the ladies in my library book club have all had lived through similar situations, and they've been very, very supportive. And that's an outlet for me to go socialize. We meet once a month, and that's where, you know, that's where I get to go for an hour and socialize and do stuff and not really worry about things too much.
There's a lot of resources in our communities about which we're often unaware. As you were talking about that, Gretchen, I realized that on my 10-hour drive back to Rhode Island from Syracuse, um, taking my dad to his oncologist, I would often just have my phone Bluetooth activated and be talking with friends. That would be my way of reconnecting with friends, and it would be their way of keeping me alert and on task to drive and not letting road hypnosis take over. So those are things that uh, there's our church has multiple support groups. Uh, a support group for people who've lost children or who've lost a spouse or who are dealing with cancer or things like that. And oftentimes, even if you don't have a faith system, those are free groups that can really be helpful, I think, to help build community. Um, and I would encourage people to just reach out to neighbors or friends or family and find out if they know of any of these groups that could be helpful for you, particularly if they're virtual and you don't have to add another car trip when you're maybe depleted energy wise. The Multiple Sclerosis Foundation has several support groups that have a virtual component to them that that you can join them online when it's available to you. And I know that Christina and Eric's group is a virtual group. So um, just people getting together and sharing time with each other. Uh, so um, if you're interested in a support group for your multiple sclerosis that is virtual, we have, I think, about 140 support groups across the country. And you can just send an email to supportgroups@msfocus.org and let them know where you live, if you want a in-person support group or a virtual support group. And Marcia Harris, who is our support group person at the foundation, will get back to you and let you know what's available to you, what times they meet, what days of the week or month they meet. So a support group, I think, is definitely a potential big help to you.
You know, talking about like then community groups, and Cherie, when you talked about like the funeral homes for resources, the other thing too is like the local commission on aging, that, you know, that they come up with a lot of things in terms of support groups and things. And I think it's just anything we can do to get out of our house, out of our heads. But, and this works for me, and I don't know for everybody else, but I mean, on some levels, I'm lucky that I can have Jennifer as that point person, where it's like we have that ability to take off our quote unquote caregivee hat to just say, okay, I'm telling you this because of this, and to where you have that mutual understanding of what it is. It's like, you know, it's like, I'm not mad at you, I'm mad at the situation. So you just like have that thing to where you fully understand each other. And I think that's where that I can talk to her about things about her that are bothering me, or things about me that are bothering me. You know, it's just like to where you have that open dialogue that it's like, you know, it has nothing to do with a lack of love. It's because, and I think it's in those conversations that I'm able to take off my armor as the caregiver to be brutally honest, to say, this is how I'm feeling, you know, just to be able to have that kind of connection, because then she realizes where I'm coming from. Because if I don't say anything, I think that's where we always talk about being your own best advocate. Then for us as caregivers, we have to return that same thing to be, you know, our best advocates and speaking for that. And when you're talking about micromanaging, I feel for me, and I'm not saying this is because I'm a guy kind of thing, if I can be, you know, gender, but it's just like, I don't know if I micromanage our relationship enough, because a lot of times I'm just kind of blasé of just like, well, what do you think? And leave a lot up to her, where it's like sometimes I need to step in. But then by the same token, we as caregivers need to remember to take care of ourselves. And like I had, for honestly, guys, 2 years, I had like 3 different prescriptions for physical therapy that I had from different doctors. And this, that Jennifer, the person I'm caring for, said, Dan, if those were mine, you would never let me get away with that. So take care of your physical therapy. I'm not going to do anything until you call. So it's just like, I think those are the things. But we didn't have that kind of connection until I was having a conversation about something where, you know, in terms of like opening up. Because I'm not one, I don't like to talk about us to other people, because I think that's like very much a private thing. And I don't know if that deals with because of a married relationship. I just don't open up about that. But that's where I feel lucky that I'm able to open up to Jennifer about those things, because she doesn't take it personally. And I think that's just that agreement and that trust in each other, that this is not personal. This is me as a person. So I think that's just being able to see each other as people and not care receiver.
Yeah, that's
I I feel the same exact way, Dan. Like, I think when you're married with somebody, it's harder to just kind of go out and say, to someone else. This is what I'm feeling at home or whatever, because that's your spouse and that's who you love and care for. And so with Eric, it is, we do lean on each other in that way. Like he's very open with me about how he may feel. He can get vulnerable with me and I'm cool with that. And the same way I can do that with him. You know, and you have to not be so gentle. How do I don't know how to say it. Maybe Dan can concur with me. Is that you don't want to you're afraid to say something that will hurt. You don't want to say something that might make them feel like bad about you being the caregiver, because but and I say that because he already sees it. He already says things like, you know, I don't want you, I see you doing everything. I see you doing this and I see you doing that, and that makes me feel like this. And I'm like, so he sees it. He knows it. I don't have to tell him that. He already knows. He knows that. But at the same time, I have to also say to him, I do this because I want to do it. I don't do this because I have to. I do this because I love you and I get to do it. We did not get married based on what you know what we saw down the road. We had no idea what was going to happen. We didn't know. We didn't know that, you know, one of us, we knew that maybe eventually we would have to care for one another or one for another, but we didn't know how it was going to happen. And when it did happen a couple of years ago, when he got before he became bedridden, it was just like, okay, here we are. Now what we gonna do about it? I'm gonna do this and I'm gonna care for you and I'm gonna do it until and we don't have to do it anymore, you know?
Thanks. We've got a couple of comments in the Q&A. Michelle says, I have a daughter with CP, cerebral palsy. I've been her caregiver for her whole life, 35 years now. Now, because of my MS, there's much that I can't do anymore, so I'm having to find outside help for her. It is hard. How do I let go of the guilt of not being able to take care of her as much? Anybody want to weigh in on that?
I think parents, all of us have guilt. And I I think as long as you can give love, that's what matters, and that's what your children are going to remember. And I have friends with cerebral palsy, and there are apps and things that you can download that offer support and creative ways in which you can support them, even if you can't do it physically. There's other things that are available. So just know that you're doing a great job. 35 years of support so far. You've made it this far. You can keep going. So it might not look the way you envision it, but you're doing a great job.
I was you were talking about the comments. I lead a parent support group for younger people, pediatric MS group, and the parents a lot of times, and even my dad, he felt guilty. He's like, I gave you MS. And I'm like, you didn't give me anything, you know. And he's like, he was kind of like, forget you, you know, type of thing. But there's that guilt, whether you have, you know, a sickness or not. You want to be there for your child, or you want to feel like you can do more. And I say, you know, to them, you're doing the best you can, you know, and a lot of times the child is not looking at it the way that you're looking at it. And I get to hear their side because I don't share what the parents share, and I don't share what their children share, but I can, you know, kind of play off of both sides. But I think it's important to not beat yourself up because you're not doing how you think you should do. Like, example for me, I thought I was gonna, you know, be married with children, but I just turned 45, and children for me look like the MS youngsters, the young kids diagnosed with MS. So I'm their MS mom. I just called one the other day. He called me actually from work, and I'm like, what do you have on? Like, why aren't you should have a different top on and let people see your work shirt and all that. So parenting for me is coming a different way, you know, for a parent diagnosed with MS and you have a child that needs help too. It's okay. Like you do the best you can. Like Christina was saying, like with her and her husband Eric, they're doing what they can. Where taking it day by day. So yeah, don't guilt yourself. That just, unnecessary. It'll stress you out for no reason. So
I
yeah.
see Susan in the chat says the parent support group that Dania runs has been an amazing help for me. Is there any information about for people that need that support that you want to tick into the chat?
Yeah, I can put that in there. But I'll say there's 3 different groups I do, and I believe you should be able to find all of them through the MS Foundation, and they're all virtual. One is for people in their 20s, 30s, and 40s diagnosed with MS. One is for pediatric people diagnosed with MS, and the other one is for the parents that have children diagnosed with MS. And so I think the best way is to, go to the MS Foundation website or to the National MS Society and just put in the support groups. I don't have the exact, but yeah, it's pediatric, and then also the one is young professionals group or young persons group. On the society, but this on Foundation, MS Foundation and the MS Society. And then you guys see my name, you can always reach out to me. I don't mind at all.
And again, support groups at msfocus.org, and Marcia can put you in touch with her. David has his hand raised. David, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Yes, good evening. I really enjoyed today's talk about caregiving. And Cherie, I love that first question that you asked about what do you do? And that's what I encourage everyone here. What do you do to in your MS journey? And you talk about breathing and talk about the spiritual aspect, and you talk about the church, and that is just so important. And so we all have to continue doing these things. I've been living with MS now for 27 years. I'm not giving up now. So for caregiving, it's a wonderful thing. You're not only doing stuff for yourself, but you're doing stuff for others as well. And so I applaud you all. You all are so good. And I know Dan, which is Jennifer. I know Jennifer. Hi, Jennifer. Hi, Eric. I know them well, and I've had talks with each of them. And so, yeah, y'all just stay strong and keep on doing what you're doing, and never give up.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. David is one of our big supporters and contributors from south of our border. He's in the
The
Bahamas, and
Bahamas,
he runs a support group in the Bahamas that is also
Bahamas.
virtual, right, David?
Yeah, we are virtual, but we do it every quarter. So we just went out on Saturday gone. We just went to a restaurant, and this caregiving, what y'all talking about, we were able to. So I'm not able to help other ones as in feeding them. One of the other MSers, they're having a cane, whatever, and I ordered like this the conch, and so they said they want some, and so one of my other MSs got up out of her chair and stumbled where she was and fed the other MSer, and that made me so happy, and that's what we all are doing, and that gives me joy. So yeah, we meet out every quarter, and so we met at a restaurant on Saturday.
Oh, David brings up a really good point that when we gather together, we feed our souls, not just our bodies. And I think that particularly when we're burdened with caregiving, just being in a group of people, whether it's online or whether it's in person, who um, are not the focus of our caregiving, we tend to be buoyed up, we tend to be lifted. So, so thank you. Thank you,
Yes.
David. You want to go
Yeah.
ahead and mute yourself when you're
Okay.
ready?
Um. Okay.
There's one other person in the chat. Dawn says that she's dealing with her husband's cancer at this point. So she takes him to the Mayo Clinic and he takes her to her appointments and she's dealing with his medication. So, you know, even in a caregiving relationship, there's often a give and take where we help each other, as Gretchen was saying, that together they can manage to get things done. Um, we are at the top of our hour. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. And again, thanks to Novartis for sponsoring this hour together. We're very grateful to them. Um, our next webinar will be 2 weeks from tonight, and it will be Dr. Boster with his Ask the MS Expert. So on December 9th, gosh, can you believe it's December already? December 9th at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time, Dr. Boster will take your questions regarding MS. We welcome you all to join. When you leave the webinar today, if you're on Zoom, please just stay on for just a moment for a real quick survey to let us know what you want to see for webinars. For educational offerings. If there's something we haven't covered that you'd really like more information on, please let us know. Oh, we've got one new message. I bet you though it's this was really good, Eric Nelson. Our spouses, our care people, those that we're caring for are supporting us in the wings. Another way that we mutually support each other. Thank you all folks for being part of this panel. I'm so grateful. We just have such a wealth of experience here.